Welcome to Top Bracket Podcast, where top performers share the strategies behind real success.
Hello, on the podcast here today, I have Ms. Valetta Taylor, a PE strategist, who is going to talk to us today about many things that she's gone through in her career. So, Valetta, I want to start at the foundation because when someone develops a lens as sharp as yours, it usually comes from experience, not just theory. When you look back across your career, what experience most shaped the way you think about transformation, execution, and leadership today?
Wow. Well, when I think about my experience, I started my career in sales. I remember that when I transitioned from being a sales rep into leadership, that I was given a team and was told, you've got 18 reps and 11 of them are really good. Yeah. And you've got 4 superstars and you've got probably three people that you need to fire.
And they left that responsibility up to you
Yeah,
going
and I
into it?
remember I was like, you know, I think it was 26, 27 years old, and I remember thinking, "Wow, thanks." And then, of course, ranked in the bottom of all the teams, right?
Yeah.
They were kind enough to make sure I started off with a great start. And and I remember thinking, I don't know anything about these people. And I didn't want to just go in and get rid of these 3 people without giving them an opportunity to see what they could do. And I wanted to know when it was all said and done that I had done everything I needed to do before I let them go.
Which is the
And
right thing to do.
I remember sitting with everybody. And as I was sitting with everybody and listening to them talk to their customers, I noticed that there were some key differences, later on known as competencies, between what the people that were performing really well were doing, what the people that were doing good were doing, and what the folks that were struggling were doing. And I started to put together, really back then, just to show my age, an Excel spreadsheet that identified all of those skills.
That doesn't
And I
show your
started
age.
to grade these people because I was like, wait a second, this is bigger than someone not getting it, right?
Yeah.
And it revealed so many things, like what's happening when these people come into an organization? What are we giving them? What happens once they're in the organization as far as processes and understanding how an organization works? Are we telling people? Are we showing people? Are we allowing them to understand what winning looks like every single day?
Wow.
From the person at the very beginning of the organization to the leader that is responsible for that department. And it was really evident that we were not. And no matter I've been in organizations that are $6 million. I've been in organizations that are billions of dollars, and I see it all over the place. And just taking that time saved all those people. And I remember my boss at the time saying, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, this is, I called it at the time my coaching, calendar." And he was like, "Wow, one day you're going to be he said, how did he put it? He was like, one day you're going to be a trainer of people." And I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in training and develop anybody. I just want to make sure this team does well. Yeah, that's all I care about. And, this team went on to do incredible things. I feel like it had less to do with me because all I did was I provided clarity and I provided direction and I gave them the tools that they needed to do the job. And I still do that today, no matter what I do, no matter what role I'm in, no matter what person I'm working with, whether it's an executive or it is someone that's on the front line, customer service, customer working, same thing, different
Wow.
information, right? But same thing. And that's really where it started for me. And I'm so grateful. I always say this all the time. I'm so grateful that I found a success and a love for what I do before I found deep success in it, where, I meet people all the time that they're very successful in what they do, but they don't love what they do. And so they kind of hate. I'm
I
like,
meet a
I
lot of
always
people like
say,
that.
yeah, right. These are the people that go home and I'm like, yeah, you kick your dog or whatever. But, I love what I do.
You know,
And that love, I hope continues to translate for the rest of my career and with everybody that I touch and everything that I do. But that's really where it started.
you're really, really blessed to have found your calling. People say that some have a job, some have a career, but some have a calling. And those that are
Mhm.
blessed to find their calling never truly work a day in their life. And that challenge they dropped you into really forced your perspective to mature pretty quickly, which is great. A
Yeah.
lot of leaders talk about execution, but not a lot of them really understand what that actually means and how to make that possible. You focus heavily on tools, technology, or many organizations rather focus on heavily on tools, technology, and strategy, but miss the conditions people actually need to execute. What are leaders most often overlooking in your perspective?
Oh my goodness. This is funny that you would ask this question. Recently, I spent a lot of time coaching people and mentoring people. I always say by accident because I don't ever want to do it, but it just happens, right? I took some time about 2 months ago to really sit back and coach myself because
Oh,
this role that I'm in and that I'm transitioning out of was probably one of the more difficult roles that I've ever been in. And so what I wanted to know is, okay, how did I get here? Which I knew a large part of that is because my COO that I currently worked or that I previously worked with was now CEO here and the PE. And they were like, we need, and I did ask as part of this, and it took me 5 months to decide
hmm.
more because it was in Chicago and I don't like the cold. But why do you need me here? Right.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I asked all the right questions. I flew down, I met the C-suite, I met the executive team to verify. I've known my CEO for 12 years. Uh, So I was like, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to do this. I'm going to help you. Or, how long do you need me? Okay, I can help you. But as I sat back a couple of months ago and I reflected on everything, I'm like, what did I miss? And not that anything did anything wrong, but I felt like I could have been more successful. And as I was coaching myself through this and asking myself questions and defining what good looks like for me and what great looks like for me and what my best working conditions were like,
Mhm.
I developed this thing that I really call an executive conditions framework. And I started to look at what is that? Like, what is it needs to be in place in order for an organization to be successful? Because there are some key things that are missing when it comes to being successful in an organization. And so many times we look at it and we say, hey, the people aren't doing the right thing. We got to put a different technology in. Right now, there's a lot of conversations around AI, but we never talk about the conditions. And what I'm talking about is there strategic clarity amongst the executive team? Is
Mm.
there leadership ownership amongst the executive team? Is there cultural safety amongst the executives so that we not only are okay saying this isn't a good idea, but we are also okay saying we can't get this done in time, or we are failing, but we're going to fail fast and we're going to learn and continue to go. Do you have, and I put together 5 conditions that, to evaluate to say, are these conditions in place? Because regardless of whatever else you do, if those 5 conditions are not in place and they are codependent on each other, it's really difficult to be successful. And even for me, when I was stepping back and looking and thinking about everything, absolutely. My CEO knew exactly what he wanted to do.
Mm.
But did his team have all of those conditions? Did they have the decision, maturity to say, yes, I am owning this decision. This is what we need to do. No paralysis at all. Go and do it. Right. The answer is no.
So, do they usually mistake activity for alignment or strategy for readiness in a sense?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And then, not knowing what the current condition is as far as that operational piece of it, like, do you understand the current state of the people and the processes and the technology that's being used? And just making a lot of assumptions, right? Saying, to your point, if we're doing something, it's better than where we are now. But even taking the time to calibrate what's currently happening, I get really like crazy when I hear some, always, many, a lot. I'm like, that's not quantifiable.
You can't
What?
put that in a box.
Yeah. What does that even mean? What's happening?
Hmm.
And it's those things. Like I said, how can you tell someone that they're not doing something right or that they're not winning when you can't even quantify it? Like,
No, that's fact.
you're always late. Well, what time is on time?
What's the standard?
Right? Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, but what I've realized, and it's funny, 'cause I was looking at this today, is that those conditions not being in place makes the folks that do my role really, really difficult. And then the folks that work for me, that, with PMO and the project managers and all of the people responsible. But what they don't realize a lot of times is that they are missing those conditions because there's so many other places to point fingers, right? Or to be distracted within an organization to not look at those things or to not even realize that you own a lot of those pieces. And so, I've been working on this framework because what I really want to do is go into, especially our private equity firms where we have such a short amount of time to get things
Build
done,
that value.
right? You got it and go, right? And so right now we're seeing a 3 to 6 month delay in getting projects done, not to
Oh
say that
my.
they're being done correctly because those conditions don't exist. One of my leaders told me that, he went into the board meeting and he's like, we got this new technology put in and they're like, well, he said, we got it implemented. And they're
Mhm.
like, yeah, no, where's the results? How are you using it? And I just said, I wasn't involved in the implementation. I was like,
Yeah.
you should have just said you got it installed.
So yeah, I was gonna say basically what you're saying is it was
Yeah.
implemented, but not
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Cause I
bought the
was like, is
licenses
anyone
for it.
using it? No.
How is it being used? What outcomes are being generated by it?
Right.
You gotta ask those
Yeah.
core questions.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's a pretty interesting framework. It sounds
Hmm.
like that was the moment that you saw where you saw a pattern where it needed to be named and formalized.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's go a little deeper. Walk us through or walk me through the executive conditions framework, what it is, why did you create it, and what the business problem is designed to solve more in depth at a mass level. That was one example, but how else have
Yes.
you applied this?
Okay. Well, I would love to do that. I actually had it open because I was thinking that we might talk about this a bit. I think what it's important for people to know is that, the framework is not a criticism. It's an opportunity. And I don't want to look at it as like a coaching or a tool. It's truly a diagnostic to pull out an assessment for you to decide what areas in the organization that we can tackle in order to be better. And that's how I want people to look at this. It sounds like you've had some experience in this space.
Oh, yes, I have. Especially when you talked about the quantifiable nature of an outcome. One of
Hmm.
my so I buy and sell businesses. That's my primary job. I teach others how to do the same. And one of the general managers at one of my portfolio companies was better for he's basically yelling at one of the employees, which I never
Oh,
condone.
wow.
But so I pulled him aside and I asked him what's going on before I didn't want to repeat his behavior towards him, of course.
Hmm.
He said he keeps giving me excuses, and I got this box, and I'm asking for a number, and he keeps giving me sentences, and I just need a number to put in the box. And I realized that moment that's a better way to explain it. Just tell him gently, "Hey, thank you for the background, but I can't put that in this box, and I need to finish this report." So what did you actually accomplish?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's painful what we see. Okay. For some reason, now that I've got you, it's stick my computer doesn't want to pull anything up. Right. I'm going to have to move you out of the way for just a second. Forgive me.
It's okay. And I have two book recommendations for you based on where we're at in the conversation so far. Don't
Okay.
let me end the interview before giving you those.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can refresh the page and get it to come back. That's funny. This only happens when you're like, oh, yes, I'm going to pull all this stuff up so I have it. And then, of course, of course.
Oh, okay. We can edit this part out.
This is so strange. It's just sticking. Okay, let me take it all the way down and bring it back up. So, what I will tell you
Okay.
about this is that because I started to build this out, and this is so funny because I told you that I started off coaching myself through this,
Mhm.
and as I was coaching myself through this and asking myself all of these questions, I was like, I think I have something here that's bigger than me. And as I started to really, really pull it apart, I started to realize that it wasn't just about me because one of the questions that I took everything, my resume, all of my questions, all of my frustrations, everything, and I dropped it into a large language model. And I asked one question:
What
what
was
were
that
my
one
blind
question?
spots? what were my blind spots? That's the question I asked.
What?
And it said, you made the assumption that everybody knew and that everybody worked the same way. I
Wow.
thought, right? And I thought, okay, well, so then I started asking some more questions around what I knew, which is, well, why wouldn't I assume that everybody knew the direction that we were going in? Why wouldn't I assume that the culture was safe to do A, B, C, or D, right? And that's really where the assessment or the diagnostic came from, is asking those questions became the diagnostic.
Okay. And is
And
the
that's
diagnostic is it different than the conditions framework, or was that the precursor to it?
that was the precursor to it, because as I started to ask those questions about, you know, the strategy piece, the questions led me to, okay, the questions that you're asking are all around strategic clarity. So, boom, there is your first condition, right?
Okay.
And then, okay, these questions that you're asking are around decision velocity, which is a very frustrating one for me, right? Okay, there's another one. Well, these questions are around, who owns this? You assume that it's the person that told you that they wanted this project done, but they're nowhere to be found when it's time to make decisions. Or, when you're getting in the room with everyone else, they're acting like everyone else, so it's like,
Yeah.
what's going on here, right? And the same thing with cultural safety and the operational alignment. And so, once all the questions were in, they were identified in these 5 key areas, and that became the assessment piece. And so that's really the birth of this thing. It was not intentional at all.
The best things usually aren't.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so well said. And it's so true. And it felt good because a lot of times you have these frustrating moments and you just feel frustrated. But when this happened for me, it felt like I have a solution. And I think that I could help a lot of organizations not feel frustrated. And I think I could help a lot of organizations set up for success right away and not get into that place that a lot of organizations get into. And so it was a very exciting time for me just because I knew that I had something that where I could help somebody.
Well, it sounds like you come in and kind of reignite the idea of scalability in organizations.
You got it. You got it. Exactly. Um, and take some of the frustration off the table, right? Because I mean, the truth of the matter is people are frustrated every single day, and it's causing churn of customers and it's causing churn of employees, because no one understands what they're supposed to do. And you feel like, I'm not being set up for success. What am I doing here? They,
Have
they
you
don't
ever
care
studied
about me here.
industrial psychology?
Huh?
So have you ever studied industrial psychology?
I have not.
Seems like you basically have mastered the fundamentals of it through experience.
Yeah. Experience, pain, tears. So the 5 conditions are simply this, and I kind of mentioned them all over the place, but I wanted to break them down and give you a little bit more. So I'll give you the framework, I'll give you the definition, and then what it looks like, and then what the failure pattern looks like as well, because I think that I know that that's important. So that first one is strategic clarity, and that's the organization having a clear, aligned understanding of what matters most and why. And what I mean by that is that I've been in organizations where the organization's defined priorities are all over the place. And they say, we're going to do these 3 big rocks, but there's 20 initiatives competing with each other. Or even worse, the executive team is so misaligned that everybody wants their thing done and nothing's getting done.
Oh, wow.
Um, the other one here is a clear linkage between strategy and execution. You asked that question earlier. And
Mhm.
and that's one. I feel like there's a lot of meetings talking about what we're going to do, but what actually gets done,
Yeah. Who's
right?
responsible for the execution?
You got it. And then the leadership, I kind of touched on it a second ago. The leaders are aligned on the direction and the trade-offs. Like we're going to discover things along the way, right? Like we do with any project, but we're not going to do these things right now.
So
And we're
do you
all
kind of
aligned
let
on
them
that.
know that it's okay to experiment when they approach it that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then what it looks like as far as the failure patterns when this condition is not met. You have competing priorities, you have constant reprioritization, and you have activity without progress. And we see this all the time. That's the first one. The second one is decision velocity. And I don't have a lot of patience, so this one really gets me going. Yeah, I have. This is where I always with this one I'm like, these are the people that are trying to keep me out of heaven. So it was this one here is the organization's ability to make timely, informed, and competent decisions at the right levels. What this looks like is that the decisions are made close to the work. There's
Okay.
clear ownership and authority, and there's speed without chaos. This one is so important, the entire project, even from the beginning. In my space, a lot of times I'm told, can you find out what's currently happening? And then can you be a part of the vetting process to help us come up with the solution? And I will work, with a lot of heart and intensity and intention to give them everything they need to make not just a decision, but the right decision. And then it will stop right here.
That's so
I
important.
literally have spent 12 to 15 months looking at solutions, specifically in the finance area, for an order to cash solution for a team, only to see a solution not being made, not because it wasn't the right solution or we didn't have enough information, just because the decision velocity wasn't there. No one was willing to make the decision. But the irony was the people that should have been making the decision were complaining about the impact of not having a decision made on a regular basis. It is baffling to me. I
So
don't know.
it sounds like to me, one, fundamentally, all great leaders make decisions quickly. That is a
Yes,
fundamental trait of great leaders. It's a part of success philosophy that everyone agrees on. When you
you
look at
got it.
that from an organizational perspective, it's really challenging to get multiple levels of leadership to agree on the trade-offs and outcomes of a decision. And it
Hmm.
sounds to me like they succumb to groupthink. And because they succumb to groupthink, no one actually makes a decision and owns the outcome because they're afraid of the consequence. Does that sound about right?
That does sound about right. But if you think when I finish going through all of these and I get to that last one where we're talking
Mm,
about cultural safety, that's really where that lives.
okay.
So the failure pattern for the decision velocity is that bottleneck at the top. Endless alignment meetings, which, gosh, yes. And then delayed execution due to indecision, which means delayed results. And that was really frustrating. And then the third one is that operational alignment. And this is where the degree to which the people and the processes and the systems are aligned to deliver the strategy. And what this looks like is that the functions are working towards a shared outcome, clear roles, clear responsibilities, clear handoffs. The systems support it, they don't hinder it, and execution happens. Here, poof, when failure happens, the patterns are this is one that we hear 9 times out of 10. It's like the organization is very siloed. You
Yeah.
have conflicting goals. You have redundant or broken processes. And then you have technology that exposes misalignment. Right now there's a lot of talk around AI and people are talking about putting it in. But what's happening is it's not fixing things for people if they don't take care of this operational alignment. It's just showing them faster. And so instead of fixing the operational alignment, they'll just say, well, okay, well, that's not working either, or they'll stop doing it. Right. And
Yeah.
this is one that even if you have the first two, if you don't get this right, it will fail because this is where the people and the processes and the systems will collide. And this is a big one that has to be addressed before you decide what it is that you're going to do. The fourth one, and so the next one and the fourth one is the leadership ownership. And this is the extent to which the leaders own the outcomes, not just overseeing the activity, which you talked about earlier, but they actually
Mm.
own the outcomes.
That's the difference
And
between
what that
management
looks
and
like,
leadership.
you got it. And so this one, the leaders are accountable for the results, not just the updates, but the actual results. and the activities, the active sponsorship of transformation. And a lot of
Okay.
times that gets confused sometimes with change management. And I tell people all the time, change management is one thing, but transformation is redefining. And you need to make sure that, you understand what you're asking for. And then a willingness to challenge and to be challenged. And that's what leadership ownership looks like. Where you'll see failure in that one is delegation without ownership. That's something I see, unfortunately, more times than not, which is also the relative or the ugly cousin to the decision paralysis, passive leadership behavior, and transformation treated as someone else's job. Especially in my role, when it comes right down to it, they'll say, oh, well, that's a transformation initiative. I'm like, no, it's your initiative. I'm your partner.
Stop trying to pass the buck.
Right. I am your partner. I am your specialist. I am here to make sure you have everything you need to ask you the right questions, to make sure that you don't miss anything, and to ensure that you're successful, not just during this transition, but throughout the whole thing. And that all your goals and desires of not just yourself, but every stakeholder, including the board and the organization, are met. And I already know I'm in trouble when they tell me it's a transformation initiative.
That's so powerful
Yeah.
and really funny.
hmm
It's quite
Yeah.
comical in a sense too.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, give me your check. And the fifth and final one is that cultural safety. And that's an environment where people can speak truth, they challenge thinking, and they operate without fear. And I know it's a buzzword and we hear it a lot of times, but what that looks like is really psychological safety and decision making. And constructive, challenge is encouraged, and issues surface early, you know, um, and not after failure, because I have been in meetings and I've been on projects where someone in the room knew that that thing was out there or that thing was going to happen, but didn't feel comfortable saying something because they didn't want to be the negative Nancy,
Yep.
or they didn't want to be the person to upset the boss. And
That happens in organizations of all size.
oh gosh, yeah. And it's so unfortunate. And no
Mhm.
one ever stops and says, what was wrong? What happened? And our conditions in our organization that allowed that person or persons, because usually more than one person knows, not to say something, right? And this one's funny because, like you said, this happens all over, no matter the size, right? You could have 5 people, this could happen. The failure pattern is there's silence in the meetings and the resistance is outside. I worked with the CIO and he used to say, there's no pocket vetoes. So when we leave this
Yeah.
room, right? Well, the problem with that is, where is it then? Where is the veto? And that's what's missing when you say things like that. When you weaponize feedback, or that political
Yeah.
behavior, and then hidden risk or delayed escalation. Now, I mentioned that all of these work together. They're not independent levers. They're actually interdependent levers. Like, you
Yeah.
know, strategic clarity without decision velocity means a stalled strategy. Decision velocity without culture safety means poor decisions, right? Operational alignment without leadership ownership means execution gap. Leadership ownership without clarity means misdirected efforts. And cultural safety without accountability means comfort without performance. And hopefully you can tell that this is something that I'm very passionate about. It's really, really important to
Oh, for
me.
sure.
I am so excited that I stumbled into this, but it's so needed. Oh my gosh.
It
Oh my gosh.
reminds me of a policy that I had at my very first startup,
hmm
and it was my co-founder's idea, so I can't take credit for it. But
Okay.
the policy was if you are aware of a challenge or a problem and you don't report it and it's later discovered that you knew, you'll get in trouble. If you don't say anything, you will get in trouble, but if you know and you do say something, there's basically no consequence because you helped us identify a problem before it got larger than it needed to be.
Yes, yes, yes. As it
Yeah.
should be, right? As
But
it
that's
should
a
be.
transparency and trust thing that we can dive deeper to that into that in a couple questions. But
Yeah.
the next thing I guess I really want to know is once you understand the conditions, which you outlined very well, thank you. I love listicles. Once
Mhm.
you understand the conditions required for execution, you also start seeing the warning signs when those conditions are missing. So, in your experience, what are the earliest warning signs that transformation and effort is really failing,
Mhm.
even when the executive team still thinks they're on track?
Oh, goodness. So some of the things that I see right away is when the outcomes are really vague. So let's say in the beginning, I'm asking, what are
Mhm.
we solving for? And I can't really get clarity or it's inconsistent. Then I know we're in trouble because what I'll see 9 times out of 10 is the first meeting, they'll say, this is what we're doing and this is what we're solving for. Okay, go out and find a vendor. Let's just use that for example, right?
Yeah.
For a particular technology to solve for this. And come back with 3 choices. I will do that. And they'll, a lot of times it will be, that's not what we're looking for. Or that's not quite what we're looking for. Or I'm not sure what we're looking for. And I've heard all three.
Mhm.
Then I know we're in trouble. Like it happens early.
So, what tends to break first? Is it the trust, the clarity, the accountability, or the operating rhythm? It sounds like it could pretty much go in any direction.
It could go in any direction. It could go in any direction because sometimes I've had the person know exactly what they need, right?
That's
You
lucky.
know, AR and order to cash is a great one, right?
Okay.
You know what's wrong. You know your
Yeah.
cash flow's jacked up. And
Yeah.
it's like, and there's some things you need to do. And you know that there's a certain group of people that do those things. But however, when it's so you go out there, bring the people back, present it, great job. It's time to make a decision. Okay, well, hold on. Let me ask some more people. Hold on. Let me get that price again. Can we talk to them about bringing the amount down? I'm like, well, hold on a second, because we've already proved up and we've shown where we're going to save the value. What's this really about? That's a decision issue, right?
Okay.
Because we had strategic clarity and we
Yeah.
knew what we were doing, I thought, right?
Yeah.
Thought, but then, and so, that's the beautiful thing about the conditions is that it shows up everywhere. So my whole idea behind building out this framework is to get in front of an executive team early or even in the middle of it and say, I want to assess by giving each of you this diagnostic individually and then bringing the assessment back to you as a team where you currently are today to talk about what we need
Mm,
to do going forward
okay.
so that these things stop happening. Because whether you realize it or not, it's costing you so much so that today I actually built out a widget because I started to build a website for this. I built out a widget today that says, how much is the project? And then which
Mm,
conditions do you believe you currently already have that are below what you need, right? This is how, and it calculates, this is what it could cost you
wow.
based
Now that's
on the
one
delay,
way to spur someone to action. So
right?
that's where leadership really gets exposed, especially at the
Mm-hmm.
top of the organization.
Mhm, mhm. And if I can do that early enough, especially when we're talking about like PEs and some of those groups, they have a really good success of improving their runway because then by introducing this early, my hope is also that I'm introducing a language that you feel comfortable talking about as you go through your projects and as you go through your transformation, right? Because then you
Mhm.
start to say, did we have strategic clarity? Did we have decision velocity, right? And that's what I want to put into place because then things change. You change the language, you change everything. And talking about the conditions is not something that we're talking about. We just don't. We
It's a
talk about
little
what
it's
we need to do.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
So you work closely with a lot of CEOs and CFOs in very high pressure environments. What would you say separates a leadership team that drives real operational performance from one that unintentionally creates friction and confusion? When that partnership is off, what does the rest of the organization start to feel downstream? Because it sounds like
Yeah.
it's a compounding issue.
Just in case any of them see this, I love you all. I really do. First of all, you have got to have CEO that stands firm in what needs to be done. That strategic alignment lives and dies with that guy.
CEOs are always position, but not positioned, but presented as these alpha male decision holders. And behind the scenes, it sounds like they're they're not.
Gosh, and I'll tell you what, I've been really, really blessed that I've been about 50-50.
Okay.
But however, the ones that are, this is what we're doing are a bit crazy, but
Mhm.
but they get it done.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, somebody has to be a change agent and drive it forward, right?
yeah, they struggle through the culture part, but they get the work done. They don't have any friends, but they get the work done. But not having that level of clarity, because
Mhm.
someone has to hold all of those leaders accountable to say, no, 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 no. The focus this right now is we're going to get safety in check. We're going to bring or get our EBITDA up by doing these three things. If it doesn't directly impact these three things, it doesn't get done this year unless something major happens. And then we have some type of process on the back end to
Yeah.
decide if that's what we're going to do based on the bandwidth we have, right? Like, it has to be that tight. And then honestly, you cannot put someone like me on a vertical team. I have sat on teams where it's like I have the vice president of transformation, and so she is going to do my stuff. Well, I'm an enterprise contributor,
Do me
and
a favor for the listeners. Describe what a vertical team is for those who don't know the
okay,
lingo.
so if I am sitting on, let's just say that I'm sitting on IT. If
Okay.
I'm sitting on IT, or I'm sitting on, really, I've had it happen with the COO, I've had it happen with the CIO. They all have their own initiatives, right? CRO, they all have their own initiatives, their own things that they want done. And when I sit in that vertical team and not enterprise wide, which is why usually I sit under the CEO, or I sit under the COO sometimes because he understands that level, or I sit under a chief transformation officer. I am enterprise wide. So I can work with the entire organization versus working with one vertical of the
Hmm.
organization, because it's really difficult for me to hold a department or a department head accountable if I'm sitting on their team without causing, when I talk about that
Yeah.
political piece, that's where that comes into play. And it's really, really difficult. And it's very frustrating for someone in my role, because I need to be able to say the right things aren't happening here, or,
Yeah.
we
And you got
couldn't
to
do
be
that.
outspoken about it. I think
Yeah.
people lose sight of
Yeah.
the fundamentals. At the end of the day, an organization is a group of people all coming together to accomplish the same goal. But when the
Yes.
organization gets big, division sets in. I think
Yes.
that's where your conditions really come play that guiding light as a role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and even just for them to understand too, one of the things that I used to say, sometimes I feel like I'm a marriage counselor with the executive team to some degree, because not sitting on that vertical team and sitting
Mhm.
enterprise wide also allows me to be the glue amongst everyone, because as much time as these teams spend together, a lot of times they're not talking closely about what they're working on and how
Mhm.
they're working. So me being in the also allows the organization to not have duplicate work, duplicate systems, and also having just clarity amongst what is happening and being reported out in a way that allows every leader to be represented the right way. And so I really work hard to make sure that that is happening, because a lot of times, one leader sometimes is just better at talking about what their contributions are, and what's happening and how they're impacting the organization than others. But if I'm sitting horizontal, I'm really good at saying, actually, this is what you're
Yeah.
doing. Now let's talk about how to measure that
It
thing. And
allows you
so
to knock
those are
down walls.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's bring it into a more pressure filled environment. B firms typically tend to reveal a lot of execution problems pretty quickly.
Mm.
When when execution breaks down inside a PE firm, where does it usually start? Does it start with the people, the processes, the governance policies, the initiatives, the reporting, or something else? And then I said that you're all over the place within an organization in a good way, similar to a CEO. You have a
Mhm.
bird's eye view of what's going on. So, what is the first thing you need to fix to diagnose before you can responsibly prescribe a fix?
Yeah. So the first thing that I try to do, and it depends how close I am, but if it's something that specifically am working on, I will tell you, one of the things that I do early on is I start measuring what matters before that project is over.
Okay.
And so I don't get to the end of a project and not brag at all and say something didn't happen or something's not working. Like I am continuously from the beginning
Mhm.
looking, but I will tell you a lot of times people go right into, oh, the change management was bad, almost always. But
Wow.
that's not the case because 9 times out of 10, when I'm brought in, unfortunately, is they've already it up pretty good. And they're like, we need you to help us fix it. I mean, the reason I'm doing this one is, hey, we did 23 all different size A's over the last 3 years. And, everyone's in different operating systems and doing all these different things. And we need you to help us fix it. And, it's funny because they said it, but it's a lot, you
Yeah.
know? And it had to do with how it was handled in the first place. There was no playbook to talk about how these things come in and what the behavior was and what the expectations were. So it really all goes back to the front end. So when I'm brought in, like I said, 50% of the time it's to clean up a mess. I always go back to tell me what happened. And I
Yeah.
interview the people that were part of the process. And it's funny because the executive team will tell me one thing, right? But those people, they'll give you the real deal. Well, we only got 4 weeks to do this. Okay, thank you. It's like, but I always go back to the beginning. But 9 times out of 10, what I see is a lack of clarity and strategic clarity around what was supposed to be done, a lack of communication and governance, sustainability, skill. None of those things are ever discussed. It just doesn't happen
Wow.
because the fundamentals were missed. Yeah.
I have a framework that I teach my managers in my organization. I haven't named it, but I have them set the objective and then I have them choose the standard in which that objective needs to be met because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want people to set low bars.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have them select the method
Mm-hmm.
and then the implementation process. And then the result speaks for itself. So if something doesn't work, you change out the method. It sounds like that may be something that's useful to you along with your framework as a change agent.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's important to get really, really clear about, when I talk about my framework and what I'm doing, it really leads you down a path of laying everything out before you even get started, right? So from
Yeah.
the beginning, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what it's going to fix. This is who's responsible for fixing it. This
Mhm.
is who's responsible for making the decisions. This is who's responsible for owning it. This is what good looks like. This is how it's going to be scalable. This is how it's going to be sustainable. You can say whatever you want, you know what I mean? Or whatever needs to be said. You need to know failing is fine. We're going to fail fast. Like all of that's laid
Yeah.
out in the beginning, right?
And this is
And
the vertebrae that holds this whole organization up.
yeah. And then everything else gets really easy. And so, those pieces that you're talking about, they're automatically, layered
Mhm.
into all of this just by design.
Yeah.
And we're no longer talking about, this is change management because I feel like that word or that phrase gets thrown around and tossed out is the reason things fail all the time. And, I
Do you
was
feel
on
like
a,
that has a stigma
I
claim?
do. I feel like it's just an easy thing to say because, the people didn't want to do it. So it didn't get done. Right.
Yeah.
It's just an easy one to say versus, I don't know if we weren't set up for success from the beginning. Anyway, I was talking to another executive about this program that I used to work with when I was explaining it. And, I was telling him, I said, think of the conditions as the soil.
Mm.
If
Okay.
the soil is not right, if you don't have the proper nutrients, the plants may grow. But if you want maximum growth, you want maximum potential, you want maximum nutrients out of that garden or out of those flowers, you want maximum beauty, you've got to have a high level of conditions. The same thing is true for an organization. And that's
Wow.
what I'm trying to get out with this.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, yeah.
Wow. So we've talked about what broken looks like.
Hmm.
So let's flip it and talk about what good actually looks like in motion.
Yes.
How does alignment, clarity, and accountability actually show up day to day in the operations of a business that's running well versus one you brought in already fixed?
Yes. So for me, and my experience has been when it shows up and it looks well, or it's going well, you have people that are communicating and collaborating across the organization. So you don't have the silos and the divides. You have people working together. You see a lot of interdepartmental projects. For instance, when something's happening in a particular department, they're considering the other departments. They're asking, hey, this is what we're going to do. I had a fantastic CIO that was really, really good at talking about, this is something that we're going to do. What departments do we need to contact? Who needs to be involved? And he did such a great job of making sure the right people were in the room. And not only that the right people were in the room, but asking those people, is there anyone else that should be in here? And it was
Okay.
just watching that work, especially as a CIO, I was so impressed with him because you don't see that a lot, right? I haven't seen, a lot of that. And to me, that's what good looks like when the executive on the team and the directors and the vice presidents, they're asking that questions, because I don't see the folks that are doing the work not asking that questions, because a lot of times they feel like they're not in the room. When I'm in a room with a bunch of, they call them L2s, and someone in there is saying, have you talked to your team? Then I know, okay, this is good, because they're considering those people. And then the cherry on top is, what does this mean to the customers?
1,000%, because the
You know?
customers.
Yeah. And so when I hear every level being addressed in the different meetings in the different rooms, I know that we're in a good place. And then when we're talking about how we're going to measure it, because I am a huge fan of data and measuring things and being able to quantify, because I want to know what winning looks like. Because to me, I have had so many successes in my career, no matter what I've done, with minimal people reporting to me, just influence alone, using measures, just
Well,
saying, hey, this is what winning looks like. I'm here where I'm being told 75% of our revenues being invoiced on time, and to move a group of people from 75% to 99% just by presenting data. And then we're talking about moving the behaviors and habits and
yeah,
thoughts daily of 150 people just by giving them visibility to
trans-
numbers. Yeah, right?
transparency is everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to touch a little bit more on that, on psychological safety. One part of performance that often gets underestimated is the human environment underneath those metrics and the data that you present. Psychological safety is often talked about in very soft terms, but you connect it to performance. What does the lack of psychological safety actually cost a business?
Oh my goodness. I think that the final cost is turnover, right? But way before that, there's other things happening. There is um, a lack of trust. There is a lack of respect. It costs them their reputation. Sometimes you
Wow.
don't get the best employees because those
You
people
attract a
that
bunch of
you
C and B players.
say
Sounds,
again.
it sounds like you attract a bunch of C and B players.
You do, because people talk, right? If I don't feel safe someplace, I'm not going to recommend that my friends come there. And on top
Yep.
of that, I'm going to tell people what a terrible experience I'm having there as an employee. So it's probably costing them customers as well. They just don't know it. I've seen it show up in Better Business Bureau pieces, right? And I've seen it show up in your Indeeds and your LinkedIn's and all of those different places. So it costs an organization their reputation, whether they realize it or not, because you can't, we're in a world where there's so many outlets and so many places to speak on your experiences. And, the world's different now, and we really need to be careful about how we're treating people, because people don't just go home mad anymore,
No.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that, they sometimes have extreme reactions. And if an
Mhm.
organization isn't careful, they really could put the rest of their employees and their staff in dangerous situations.
Yeah. It's super
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So you've seen these patterns
Yeah.
across very different industries,
Hmm.
which makes your perspective exceptionally valuable. And I was doing some research on you. Let me know if this is wrong, but you've led transformation across aviation, healthcare, SaaS, waste, and recycling.
Yes.
What lessons about leadership and execution seem to hold true across every industry from a fundamental perspective?
So what seems to, gosh, I think when it comes right down to it, it's funny. It's just the fundamental of remembering that you are working with people and to give them the respect and the opportunity to be heard and to be seen. And it's as simple as that is and sounds, it's something that leaders miss every single day. And when I interview people, I ask, and I've asked this no matter what organization or, what industry or whatever, tell me about your best, or so I always say, tell me about what happened on your best day at work. Like what happened, right? When I'm interviewing them and they tell me, and then I'll
I am
say, how did
feeling
that make
that.
you feel? Right. And because they want, they want to, it's a good feeling, right? Like, I mean, me
Mhm.
just asking you that, your face lit up, you're thinking about that, right? Maybe it was a big sale, maybe whatever it was. And then I tell them my goal is to make that happen for you every single day here.
Beautiful.
But that's true. And whether they are, working in the field or whatever it is they're doing, that's my goal.
Mhm.
And, if as leaders, we remember that we are there for the success of those people. And we think about that from the time we interview them so that we don't interview and put the wrong people in the wrong jobs. And every time we're developing people or we remember to develop people, they're going to be so much better off. But that people piece, and the same holds true for our customers. No matter what industry you're in, you're going to have people. You're going to have well-trained, if you do it right, employees
Hopefully.
taking care of paying customers, no matter what. And, there's a guy, I think his name is Kevin Cope, and he calls them the 5 key drivers. And I'm going to try to get these right. Kevin, don't hold this against me. But he talks about profit, cash flow, assets, and the other one's going to come to me in a minute. But he basically says, 4 of them are on the outside, but people are in the middle. And those people are those well-trained employees taking care of paying customers. 5 key drivers, they're the same no matter what. And it's true. But that middle it's funny that it's in the middle because it's the heart of any organization. And people can keep you going and they can shut you down. It's like, on both sides. And so from a leadership perspective, I just feel like no matter where you go, earlier you mentioned that's the difference between a leader and a manager. That's it. That's
Yeah.
really, really it is, lead
You
and
know, it's
lead.
funny that fundamentally speaking, this reminds me of a talk that I overheard. Forget the conference I was at, and I believe Larry Fink was the keynote. But he said that information is the most important asset a company can have, and how that information travels and is delivered will make or break your business or your revenue in his case.
Mhm.
But it sounds like that you have the railroad tracks for that information to actually go from point A to point B, stop at all the proper stations, and make sure
Yeah.
all the employees get off at
Mhm.
the right place to do their best work.
Yeah.
So I want to make this a little practical for our high performers that are listening who may be in the middle of change right now. For the high performers that are listening who are leading teams through change right now, what is one mindset shift and one practical action they should take immediately? What can they do this week that would materially improve execution around it?
One thing,
One
just
thing,
one, just one,
just one,
just one.
just one mindset shift. And we're not thinking tactics here. We're thinking perspective.
Yeah. I think one mind shift, one thing that you could do is, we talked about that cultural safety and that whole piece of it. And it's really to ask your team, and maybe it's not asking your team, but to make your team feel like it's okay to really be honest with you about what's going on. And I believe you can do that through a cultural mind shift. If you are meeting with them, or a mind shift, if you're meeting with them on a weekly basis,
Mhm.
maybe you don't make the face when they say something. Maybe, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Maybe you don't treat them as if you've got something else to do. Maybe you take the time to really listen and ask more questions so they feel comfortable delivering the information. Maybe you're present. You're present. because that's
Yeah.
so important, because those people have all the answers and they will tell you what you need to know if you allow them room to just say it or not.
Do you feel that your framework and leadership style works better in organizations that are more meritocratic than authoritative?
I think that they could, but I also think that it would be very eye-opening for the authoritative, especially if the desire is to get it done and to get to
Yeah.
the goals that they're trying to get to. So I could, it depends on, I think the people, you know what I mean? And how are they willing to adopt a different mindset?
Okay.
You know,
I
because
can
I've worked for
definitely see
both types of leaders and I've worked for a very authoritative leader and, you know, he would go to every location and look for something being wrong, you know, and everybody was like, no, nobody wants him to come to the location because they know he's going to come in there and, you know, pound somebody over the head.
that.
And
Real hard.
yeah. And, you know, do you know there's a book called The Fred Factor? Do you remember that book? It's called The
The
Fred
Fred
Factor.
factor? No,
And
I
yeah,
haven't heard of it.
okay, so it's about this postman who basically he really pays attention to the lives of the people that he serves.
Mm,
And you know, no one has to say they're not going to be home. He's paying attention and he holds the mail and he just does all these little things that put customer service way above and beyond. And so
okay.
for this particular leader who was our CEO at the time, I bought 15 of those books. And what I asked is, I said, hey, because I knew he was a big reader. I said, can you
Mm,
read one of these for me? And I was in a position where I was still new enough, and he hired me. So, you know, he had to entertain me. I was like, could you read this for me?
yeah.
And he read it. And he goes, okay, I'm done. Well, now what? And I said, what'd you think? And he goes, oh, I really like that book. You know what? I really like that guy. We need to do that here. And I said, I'm glad you said that.
You got the
I said,
message.
right? I was like, I got 15 of these books for you. And what I want you to do is when you go out in the field, I want you to look for a Fred. And when you see the Fred, I want you to come back here. I want you to write a note in one of these books and I want you to send it to that person. And so instead of me saying, dude, you're horrible. Every time you go out, you hit someone over the head. I just changed the behavior and set a different expectation, right?
Now he's looking for positives.
Right. So if he wasn't willing to accept that, although he had that authoritative behavior, that wouldn't
Mhm,
have happened. So that's why when you know you ask that question, it's
mhm.
really about that individual and the outcome or the adoption or their ability to hear what's being asked of them.
Would you say that
People,
most of
yeah,
the folks that you deal with are coachable then?
si-
Coachability needs they need to be coachable, but would you
yes,
say that they are coachable?
yes. I would say most of the people I can tell you such a blessing for me. Most of the executives I work with, I can count on one hand how many have not been coachable.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. A big part of what we explore on the top bracket is the shift from earned income to ownership and equity. Your background makes you really it's a really interesting bridge between that. Have you ever bought a business or invested in one or seriously considered ownership yourself?
I have not, well, I've considered ownership more from a starting a firm, probably more so, especially as I look more and more at this
Mhm.
the framework and things like that. But as far as actually buying something that's already going, no. Yeah.
Okay. Curious. I definitely see I see your framework as being a very impactful advisory tool. I mean, there are a lot of big consultants out there, but I don't think any of them have the passion that you have for that transformation and change
Yeah.
based on this conversation at least.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, let me get those books for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got a couple of them over there.
Both of them are by Sandy Ogg.
Okay.
And Sandy Ogg is a phenomenal leader. He has two books that I'm going to recommend. One is Move, the
Ooh,
CEO's Playbook
okay.
for Capturing Value. And the other is Growth, the CEO's Master Playbook for Capturing Value into Existence. Sorry, I'm reading this backwards on the camera.
That's all right.
But I
Okay.
definitely think these would be great tools to add to what you already have going. Sandy's a pretty phenomenal leader. I
Okay.
think you'd really enjoy those.
Well, thank you for that. Absolutely. Yes.
Hmm. So What is a belief about transformation that sounds smart in boardrooms but falls short in real life or falls apart in real life? So I know when everybody gets to the table, egos get involved, conversations start flowing, but things don't actually people don't take action outside of that.
I think that a lot of times people think just because they have a transformation person or have a transformation initiative, that everything's going to get fixed and everything's going to get fixed correctly. Like I said, earlier about, well, that's a transformation initiative. Like it's almost like they think they don't have to be a part of it anymore.
Oh, wow. Like they just write it off.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. One of the things that we've got to get better at, and I don't know if it is the executive team. Well, actually, I do know. It's both the executive team, the board, and myself is educating the rest of the executive team about what transformation is and what it isn't. Because I see a lot of people talking about they need a transformation lead, they need, and they're talking about all these different things that they want that person to do, but they don't understand that transformation, in order to be successful, it has to be collaborative.
Oh, I see.
You do not sit up there with your magic wand and it's like
Ivory white power syndrome.
make all these things happen. It actually gets harder when you're dealing with the executive team if you don't understand that the transformation is your partner. They're not working for you, they're working with you. And
Yeah.
you've got to be equally, you know, trusted and invested and collaborative in that whatever project it is. And having that is going to be really vital to the success of your project. And I feel like that's where we're just really misaligned. It's see it a lot, you know. And it's funny because when I've seen projects go off the rails, some of my friends will say, "Yeah." Then they went into the room and they were like, "Well, that was a transformation project." And they're like, you know,
You.
yeah, yeah. So I'm like, I used to say that's not in my title anymore. I don't, yeah, take that out of my title. But it's just a strange thing that just because you have someone in transformation doesn't mean that everything automatically gets better and goes away and you can throw all of those things on that person. You still have to be accountable for fixing them and, responsible for your people. Just because I'm there doesn't mean they're going to listen to me and do what I want. They weren't listening to you.
Yeah, and you're the guy who signs their paychecks.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, right.
How many years have you been leading enterprise-wide change?
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I got fooled a long time ago. So, I was saying that I was over at, or I didn't say, when United and Continental merged. I was actually in the training center working for one of their smaller commuters in Houston called ExpressJet. And they were struggling with the flight attendants and pilots getting along with the passengers. And there were a lot of complaints coming through the organization. At the same time, they were merging with United, which means they were also merging all of the small commuter aircrafts, and ExpressJet and SkyWest at the time were merging as well. And I wanted to put something together to improve the experience the customers were having. And it was funny because I went to, at the time, the director, and I was like,
Oh.
I built this thing and let me tell you about it. And, I want it. And then it went, and this always happens to me. Sometimes I'm like, shut up. But no, it's like, and I was like, I built this thing and I want to show it. And he's like, oh my gosh, I think this is the change management piece for the merger. I was like, wait, what? And so it went from I'm going to change the behavior of the bad actors to we're going to take your program, we're going to have you teach it to 35 other flight attendants or trainers, and we're going to train the entire staff on using this behavior. And so I have what seems like most of my career been in these adoption, change agent initiatives just by design. And
Yeah.
it's nothing I planned for, it's just
Just
something
how
that,
things unfolded for you.
yeah, it just comes, really, really easy for me. But if someone would have told me that this is what I would be doing, I would have said, well, yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, it works out.
So in these P-backed environments, the pressure to create value is pretty intense because they're on a 3 to 7 year time horizon that
Hmm.
triple what they bought the company for and
Hmm.
get it up to the next fund, take it public, or sell it to another private person, private investor. What is the most common reason execution breaks down after an investment thesis is set? 'Cause it sounds like you come in, you identify, oh, you guys were kind of wrong in that, and this is how we recorrect the course.
Yeah. Honestly, it's the way that those two things, because we have organic growth and we have inorganic growth, right? So with that inorganic growth, if you don't have a good playbook for how you are bringing these organizations that you're purchasing into your organization, and you don't have key metrics to look at and to keep high visibility on what's happening, whether that is the AR or well, honestly, the profit as a whole, like, is it what you thought it would be? Is it growing? Is that AR going down? Are you collecting all of that money? All of those KPIs need to be watched and visible with every single one. Are they coming in the same way? Are you making sure that they are adopting your efficiencies? Are you sure that you have the right operational model for each of those as you bring them in? Should you be moving them to a shared service model? Like, all of those pieces are a really big piece of it, right? That's the inorganic side of it. On the organic side of it, it's, what are we doing? Is it the right thing? How much of our organization is manual? And how much of that can we eliminate? Does what we're doing today make sense? Is it scalable? And people will tell you, I ask this all the time. Is what you're doing today sustainable if we doubled tomorrow? If the answer is no, we have an opportunity
What is that opportunity typically?
to make it scalable, because 9 times
Okay.
out of 10, it means we are extremely manual,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So whatever, because that's where the efficiencies are. That's where the organic growth, the revenue, that's where it is, because you are either paying a lot of people to do a lot of manual work that could be doing things that can contribute to the organization. They're doing a lot of redundant work. Normally, more than one person is doing the same thing. And I will tell you, no matter where I've been, what I've seen, although you're right, it is high pressure in the private equity world, 9 times out of 10, it's the same places, same stuff.
Well, that makes the gig a little easier, doesn't
It makes the gig easier,
it?
but that conditions piece that I talked about,
Yeah.
that's the piece that makes it hard.
Yeah.
Because although, and it's funny because I remember saying when I got here, I've done this before. And then I remember thinking, not with you guys. It's like,
That's a good
because
perspective to have. First principles, keep it fresh.
that changes everything. Because just because I see it as
Mhm.
someone that's sat in this space and over again, doesn't mean that they see it. Because if you haven't been on the other side of it, you don't see that accomplishment. You don't see that promised land, right? I was like, okay, so you guys are still walking around. You're the guys that are walking around for the 40 years. It's like, but I just, those two things are so huge, in order to get it right. And if you can get in right away and assess and look at it from those two lenses,
Mhm.
you're going to be good. Because the truth is, if you don't have that playbook right, and you don't have a standard way to look at those new organizations as you bring them in, every time you bring another one in, you're just piling. It's like pouring water into both holes, right? I mean, you're just making things difficult. And then on top of that, you're going to have high turnover because those people are going to be miserable because you're just pouring and piling stuff on top of them.
Wow.
And I don't know. It sounds a little crazy, but I love it.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Adam Coffey?
I don't think so. It's sound familiar.
He's wrote a couple books that I can send you on LinkedIn. He's one of my coaches and mentors. He used to work for PE firms. He bought 58 companies and had about 2.5 billion in exits. But I'm gonna see if I can connect you to. I'll send him a text after our call. I think you guys would have a very insightful conversation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to be a fly on the wall.
Okay.
What you said also brings up another question for me. When you work with portfolio companies, how do you translate the board level objectives into action at the operating level? Because it sounds like you're the glue that fills that gap in.
I mean, you really have to break it down, right? One blessing that I've had is that it's been the same PE, and
Okay.
what they want to happen, the breakdown really happens with making sure that the people know how they contribute to what it is. So instead
Mm,
of saying, hey, we still get to, hey, these are the safety numbers, this is the EBITDA that we're trying to get to. But more importantly, we talk about this is your contribution to it. And these are the things that we need you to do in order to impact that number, because they get that, right? And so I
yeah.
usually start with the leaders and we talk about what are your OKRs? How are you going to contribute to this? And then what are the KPIs for your team to do that? And then what does your team need to do? And so they understand that they're cascading up, and they know when they see that big number, if their leaders communicating everything. And my CEO too is really good about calling out different departments. It's saying, because they did this, right? Oh, collections had this percentage of, 60 last, and it's contributing to this, that
Yeah.
they're like, oh, okay, so us calling more people or getting this percentage more of, the collections number. Okay, we contributed to the EBITDA through that way, right? And so it's things like that, like breaking it down and making sure they understand it in their space. And so I spend a lot of time doing that, because not everybody knows what that means, right? And so we lose them when that happens.
You've worked across finance, operations, technology, and governance, kind of
hmm
ran the gamut. Which cross-functional breakdown tends to create the most drag on EBITDA and working capital?
Well, honestly, I would say order to cash has been pretty. The accounting team seems to be a pretty big one, because there's a lot of organizations that still do a lot of antiquated, old, inefficient processes in that space.
Oh, wow.
And they slow down cash flow. Something as simple as not optimizing even auto pay. I mean, so when I'm saying that, I mean, and it sounds crazy, I know, but I mean, it's, when you have thousands of customers, and only, gosh, I don't know, less than 50% of them are on auto pay, you don't think about how that impacts your DSO, right?
Yeah.
And that area just seems to be one, when I talked about earlier, like there's just some departments that you can go to right away, and that you're going to be able to get some major wins. That's always one that I know that I can go to. And I'm not too far behind it, to be real honest, is operations. Yeah,
Well, yeah, that makes total sense.
it's always those two. Sometimes you get really
So it's
lucky.
always those two.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. They're, right. They're always competing, and it's 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 funny because it's like everybody sees it. You know what I mean? But I guess not everybody wants to fix it. But my pastor said something that I try to remember, so that I don't minimize my contribution, and I don't offend anyone. Which is sometimes the reason why you see it and it's so obvious to you is because that's your passion. That's your gift that God's given you so that you can fix it. And you have to remember that. And so just because it's obvious to you, it's yours to fix. It's not intended to be obvious to everyone else. So go fix it. And I'm
You
like,
were given the problem to solve.
mm-hmm.
What have you learned about improving the operating cadence in companies that are moving fast but not necessarily moving together? There's no harmony. Like, how do
Well,
you resolve that problem of the neck and neck competing and dragging down?
yeah. Well, what I've learned is that it always starts at the top. And I have, before I can get anyone in the field to do anything, I've really got to get the guys our gals really, in the room to work together. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a lot of finger pointing, right? And I mean, I'll I mean, here's a great example, in this particular industry. Well, they're not paying because you didn't pick up the trash. Well, they're not picking up the trash. You know what I mean? I mean, they're
Yeah.
just pointing fingers, right? Removing all of that and just understanding that we're in this together, all of us. And it's not one over the other. They are interdependent. And one of the things I try to do right away in an organization is build core processes so that I can show those interdependencies to get rid of that, because it's the silo, and we won't get where we need to be. And the operational piece is it's so important to the organization, because it's where our customers, they experience us at the most intimate level. And so we can't afford to not get along. We can't afford to have someone get on the phone and say, well, that was sales fault, or that was finance's fault, or, do any of those things. And so just removing those silos and getting the people at the very top to stop doing it, because it really does start at the top of the organization.
Is that they are, in your experience, what are the biggest leadership mistakes during the M&A integration?
Um, well, first of all, they do due diligence, but I don't believe that the due diligence translates to what is needed in order for the organization. Let me say this differently. Due diligence is done, but there's something in between due diligence and the handoff that is missed in order for a successful implementation to happen sometimes, actually most of the time. And so because there's it's almost like a sales and operations relationship, to be real honest with you, which is you know what I mean, because it's okay, I went out and sold it, and I told them you're going to do all these things, and I may or may not have told you, and now I'm going to leave and you go do it, and they're like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't even know what it is,
Yep.
and you didn't give me any keys.
Yep.
And you didn't give me a phone number, right? And now I can't do my job successfully, and it's all your fault. Well, I'm not going to get paid because you didn't do it, so it's all your fault, right? The very same thing I see happen when we're doing mergers and acquisitions is, you know, um, I have my role, which is I go out, I hunt, I find that particular customer. I do my due diligence, and my due diligence is, okay, I checked your AR, I verified all your financials, I made sure that you had all, the assets, and I've done all those things. Check, check, check. Yes, how many people you have. I've told HR all of those things. I've moved on. Hold on, because you've told me how many people, but you didn't tell me, or, you didn't give me enough clarity on systems or how these people are going to talk to us the day that we transfer them over. Like, they don't even have emails, like just little simple things. And so that piece that sits in the middle, something's missing there. Now, some people have it. Some organizations I've seen, I've been around, they have it down. And if they don't have it down, they have a recovery that's so smooth. Most people don't experience it outside of 48 hours. Unfortunately, most organizations don't have that, or they're buying so fast, they don't take time to fix it. And I've been on that side of it too, where they're just purchasing, purchasing, purchasing. There is no lessons learned happening or any time to go back and get better
That
at
is
it.
dangerous.
Yeah.
So, what does a strong post-acquisition integration look like beyond the spreadsheets, the synergy models, and the org chart?
I think a strong post acquisition starts with a good playbook in the front and understanding what a good handoff looks like. So that's understanding, if I'm on the integration team, who am I giving this information to, and what do they need to be successful? Which means I have to communicate to my partner. One of the ways I say it is, we're on a relay team. If I'm handing you the baton and I don't know how you're going to receive it, or even where you are, you're going to drop it, and we're losing the race. If you think about it like that, you're going to take the time to understand my side of it as well. And that's what's going to make it successful. Because a lot of times, and this is when you see the silo, it's, I'm on the integration team. I've checked the boxes. I've done my part. But if you are on a team and you are working as part of the organization, you're going to say that completely differently, and you're going to see it differently, because you're going to you're going to care about the success of the customer that we're bringing in, or the employees that we're bringing in. And you're going to want to see that through. And that's the piece
I
that
see.
has to happen. Everybody has to look at it that way.
So, how should CEOs and CFOs partner during that transformation if they want to avoid misalignment and preserve that momentum?
They have to communicate the expectation up front. I do think that having clear KPIs around specifically mergers and acquisitions is huge, huge. I'm talking with the CEO right now, and he is wanting someone to come in and help him build a playbook specifically for that, and to build those KPIs that he can see post merger for that particular reason. And I think that that's where it starts, right? Because if you do that, you see right away where your opportunities are in the front, right? Because now you're looking
Yeah.
at it and saying, whoa, these numbers are starting to go down. What did we miss? Wait a second. We said that the revenue number was this, or we said we're bringing over this many assets. What happened? Why didn't we get all these trucks tagged, or whatever that information is? You're going to see it if you're looking for it and you have visibility into it. So what they can do is provide some transparency.
When a company wants better dashboards and analytics, and they can actually see that data, how do you prevent them from confusing having that data with actually having control of the outcome of that information?
So you're saying, well, I think it's in the conversation, right?
Okay.
And the intention of what those dashboards are for.
Mm.
And like, for instance, when I'm looking at, like, we do a lot of snowflake type stuff now. And I love snowflake. And I was like, and it's nice because the way that we have these conversations, we're talking about results, and I don't really see the team controlling them because they're really trying to understand what's going on. And then how do we get better? And how do we get where we are? And so I don't usually see a frustration around control. I just see more of a, okay, wait a minute, or a push around control. It's more of a, okay, wait a minute. How did that happen? And what did we miss? And what department is that? And who owns that? Right? There's a lot of those types of conversations, and what's getting in the way and what levers are being missed. And so what I try to do proactively is look at the information before I get in the room, like really look at it and understand it, so that when they're seeing it, as soon as it comes up, I'm talking about all of it and not giving them an opportunity to go down a rabbit hole or to go rogue, because I'm able to talk to the big picture. Then they can say, can you drill down on that? Or can you give me some more information on this, that, or the other? So I think that I own, to some degree, a responsibility of making sure that it doesn't turn into that, by not just going into the room and just dumping it on them and saying, here it is, boys, good luck. And it's like,
Oh wow. Okay. That's actually pretty comical. I couldn't imagine someone coming and dumping something on my desk and just walking out like, oh, that's a big problem now.
yeah, and be solution oriented, right? Like, I feel like I am so appreciative when someone comes in the room, and here's the deal. You don't always have to have the solution, but if you can tell me what's wrong and then say, I need your help solving it, I can handle that. But if
Yeah.
you're like, here's everything, I don't even know what's going on. Good luck, figuring it out. I can't even read this. That's really frustrating. But if you can come in and say, this is what's I believe is going on, or at least this is what's happening. And I'd like for you to help me with the path forward. And I do believe we can move forward. At least we've got a place to start. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with transparency and communication, right?
Absolutely.
I have another question about the whole order to cash discipline. What would you say the biggest hidden costs are of poor order to cash discipline, billing friction, or AR breakdowns that leaders underestimate? Because I don't think about that as a CEO. I kind of put it up to my financial controllers and CFO, but I'm now going to ask questions that I didn't ask before after this conversation.
Yeah. No, I mean, simple things like, is your billing, wait, let me back up. Is invoicing happening on time? Is there anything that's impeding invoicing from happening on time? Right? So before you even get to, are you assuming that the bills are going out on time? Or are the bills actually going out on time? Is the data right in the system? Or are you getting a lot of return mail?
Uh,
How are you reconciling? How much of your cash reconciliation is coming through auto pay? How much is being manually applied? How much is the bank charging you to manually put in those checks? How many of your checks are coming back to you without not invoice, I'm sorry, without what do they call them? The little tickets
mm,
that, because they have to manually key those. And
oh,
they're charging cents, but they add up. when they put those in. So, how much of that is happening, right? Because all of those things are impacting cash flow. I mean, if you think about, let's just say of we're going to make it low. Let's say 10% of the customer's bills didn't go out on time. And then, so there's one delay in your DSO, right? Then the customer finally gets the bill. And because the bill was already late, that same customer also gets a late notice that they shouldn't be getting, but because billing went out late, they're getting a late notice. So now they're mad, right?
Yeah, it's a
Right?
chain reaction.
Yep, you got it. So then they do pay you, but they're paying a little later because it all started in the front end. Now let's say that you've got another 10 or 15%, and they pay through their bank, but they didn't include the ticket. So then your bank has to go and reconcile these manually. So now you have another DSO delay, and your bank is charging you to hand key and find these customers. And if they can't find them, after they can't find them and they charge you for not being able to find them, they send those to your people internally to find them again. So now you've paid 2 people to do the job. So it's those hidden costs that we don't think
That
about. And that's just some of
compounds
them.
slowly.
Huh?
Yeah, and they compound slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, DSO is days sales outstanding.
Yes.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions to ask now. I do have one more question before we wrap up. I know we've been going for almost 2 hours. You
Yeah.
said earlier, if you asked the scalability question of if we doubled tomorrow, does this still work? And if the answer is no, then we gotta fix that.
Mm-hmm.
When an organization is scaling quickly, how do you know whether the operating model needs refinement or a complete redesign?
Well, let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that, because normally there's signs showing, normally it's already broken in some way, shape, or form, right? So normally I'm asking that question because I believe I know the answer, or I already know the answer based on how they're doing things. And so when I'm looking at it, the difference between a complete overhaul and refinement is me understanding the current processes and the current technology. So, for instance, in a situation where they're doing everything manually and there is literally no technology being used, that's going to be an overhaul.
Gotcha.
In a situation where technology is present, but it's not being optimized, then I would say that's an enhancement. But I would have to, you have to look at it and see. Or sometimes there's lots of technology being used, right? So I've been in situations where an SOW process, I'm like, how do you have 9 different pieces of technology to create an SOW? So in that situation, it didn't need an overhaul. It just needed to be cleaned up and optimized. And maybe we just need 2 tools, like what's going on. And that was a lot of process change. So it just really is about understanding what's happening and getting some clarity on that. It's it's never it's never been a situation where I can just go in without really understanding or sitting with someone that I could say, oh, yes, this is what we need to do. But I can always say, if we double tomorrow, could you keep doing what you're doing? And no matter if it's that changing the process or optimizing the tool, the answer is always going to be yes or no. You know what I mean? They're going to know, like, I can't do that. Right. One thing I always say, every organization I go into, before I do anything, especially as a vice president of transformation, where influence is really my secret power, is I first really, really work to understand. And I sit with that, I sit with the customer service reps and listen to calls. I sit with our accounts, our cash application people and watch them apply cash. I have gone on the trucks with the drivers. There is no job too small and there is no job too big that I cannot learn something. And I do my very best to sit with the people that are closest to our customer because I understand that. And then the next person I sit closest to is the person that manages our frontline team, because I feel like our customers, internal and external, lead through and come in through those two groups of people. So I really try to spend a lot of time understanding what's happening all over those areas in the organization, those touch points, whether it's employees or customers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about someone who goes the extra mile. Love that.
It served me well. It's like,
Hey, not a lot of people are willing to do it. So as we wrap up, I do want to ask you something a little more reflective.
mhm.
What does it really take for a leader to build something that performs well without breaking the people responsible for carrying it?
Without breaking the people, you said?
Yeah, without breaking the people that are responsible for carrying it.
I think for me, one of the things that I do, and one of the reasons I take that time, is I look for the things that are impacting multiple people in multiple departments. Because what I've found is, we call it the WIFM or the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
If I can, yeah, if I can impact or improve multiple people's quality of work or quality of life at work, just by design, they'll be happier. And so I don't go in saying, these are all the things I'm going to do. I might say something as simple as, tell me three things you love about your job. And then tell me three things that frustrate you. And I take all of that in. And then it's so easy, 9 times out of 10, to tie it back to the initiatives or the goals that the organization is trying to get to. Earlier we talked about order to cash. That is
Yeah.
one thing that impacts every single department. If you're in sales, it's impacting you. If you're answering the phone, it's impacting you, right? If you're delivering on an operational service delivery, it's impacting you. Collections, impacting you, right? And so what I do is I try to make sure that I'm not doing something that's for a particular department. I'm doing something that's for the organization. Everyone is being impacted positively. Now, I may not always be able to get to everyone, but if I can get to enough people, they can share that experience with those that are not being impacted in that moment. And sometimes that's enough just to know that your peers are experiencing something better. And then I listen because, a lot of times when I'm needing something done, because organizations are so lean right now, I've got to lean on the people inside of the organization to do the work. So what that means is you have your regular job, and then I'm asking you to be a part of whatever it is that I'm doing as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things I try to be mindful of is, okay, you can't sit in weekly 1 hour meetings with me and have me take four, right? And I'm taking a half a day from you every week. Expect you to still be as effective at your job where you're already lean and to also be excited about coming to sit with me. And so one of the things that I ask is, what can you do? What can you give me? And then how do I make this work for both of us? And I let them know up front, I'm going to do everything I can, everything I can. But if you can just ride this wave with me and we can, do this sprint together,
Yeah.
you're on the back end, your day is not going to look the way it looks today. And it's just having those conversations and doing those things and not running people to the ground that's going to make all the difference. Because I have worked with, the transformation leader that has done that to people with little care and a lot of arrogance and callous, and it stinks. And I don't want to do that to people. And so I really make it a point to be respectful of people's time. That's how you do it, especially in this role, because it's not like they're giving me 50 people to go out and transform the organization with, right? I'm lucky if I get 5. Yeah.
Once again, it
Something else
comes
I
back
do that
to
I tell you that
having
works like gold
what's that?
is whoever ends up working with me, and it's something that I'm so blessed that I think that this is just something that's like God put this on my heart, but I elevate those people. So one of the things I always say is, is there something else you want to do in the organization? There another role that you want, or, have you been trying to get promoted? This is a great opportunity for your senior leadership to see you. And so sometimes instead of me just presenting, I'll bring them into the room and I'll let them present. And sometimes it's the first time the executive that is leading that department is even seeing or hearing from that person. And
Wow.
you will be surprised at the energy this person finds, what I mean? Knowing that they're getting their opportunity. But I mean, I love that. And I provide that space as much as I can. And that's one that has served me well, and it works over and over and over again.
Okay. So you give them the platform that they couldn't find on their own and an open space to communicate things they might not otherwise be able to communicate or afraid to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I provide, the structure so that they can feel comfortable and confident about what they're saying, right? So they're not just in there like flapping away,
Yeah.
and make sure that they know exactly what they need to talk about. And I'll also work, with the executive a bit to say, this is their first time. They're kind of nervous. Make sure you say that they did a good job afterwards if you think that they did, and ask these two questions because I know that I've already given that person those two answers, right?
Yeah.
So I'm working on both sides.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to the people in closing? Any final message?
Well, thank you for thank you for reaching out to me. But I know that when it comes to transformation and um, change and uh, the world we're in today where everybody wants things faster and they want things, you know, quickly, it's really easy to get frustrated. It's really easy as leaders to get frustrated with your people. And I think that it is important. It's really vital that you remember it's not always that people are resisting change. You need to remember that people are experiencing loss because it's the thing that they've always done. It's the knowledge that they've always held. They're that person that everyone's always come to. And so when you remove that task or that knowledge from them and it goes someplace else, it's the loss that they're experiencing. And if you could remember that when you are working with them and you are addressing them as they go through this transformation, it's going to be a lot easier for you and replacing that loss with something else versus getting upset with that person. So just remember that it's not always resistance of change as much as it is
Yeah.
sometimes mourning of loss.
Wow. And with that, I think we're going to wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Top Bracket Podcast, where top performers share their playbook. Subscribe so you never miss the next episode.